On a chilly winter's morning at Mount Barker in South Australia, a harvester crawls through a peculiar purple crop. Normally, this machine is fed Brussels sprouts, but on the menu today is something different. These are Kalettes, a cross between a green sprout and red kale, a new type of brassica vegetable that is Scott Samwell's baby.
It's probably about innovation. It's about my generation, which is the third generation in our business, bringing something to our business. Like, what can the sons bring? The dads, the baby boomers have built this sort of sprout empire, and what can the sons do? So it was like, this is how we can make our mark.
The Samwells are among the biggest producers of Brussels sprouts in the country. They've stuck with the veggie that looks a treat in the paddock but divides opinion on the plate for 60 years.
They're not a quick cash crop. They're not like a broccoli or a lettuce that you can grow over summer. So the reason we stay with it is because we've become good at it and we know what we're doing, and we can probably make a bit of money out of it.
Look at this big one.
Look at mine, Freya.
Wow, it's massive.
Scott and his family first appeared on LANDLINE 4 years ago, when the controversial little cabbage was making a comeback. And not everyone had bad childhood memories of overboiled sprouts.
My kids love Brussels sprouts. They will eat them off the plant if they're out with me in the field. They will eat them first on the dinner plate at home at night.
And how many Brussels sprouts do you reckon you've eaten in your life?
300.
300?
I don't know. Way too much.
Do you ever get sick of Brussels sprouts?
No.
What about the taste do you like?
There's this taste that I don't know what it's called, but it's a really good taste that I don't think anything else has.
At the time, Scott Samwell was trialling a lot of new varieties of sprouts, including a different coloured one called Red Darling, which was developed in the Netherlands.
The trial was successful. We got it out into the marketplace and people enjoyed the eating experience, so we planted a little bit more, and then they went into other stores and we planted a little bit more until this year we've got quite a bit in the ground, as you can see behind me. This is only one of the plantings that we have.
The business is run by 2 generations of Samwell men, including Scott's brother Luke and cousin James. As well as the Red Darling, they produce 15 types of green sprouts. While the classic peppery taste is still in the mix, most of the morsels rolling through the packing sheds these days, including the rosier ones, are milder.
My wife, about 3 months ago, we had them and she roasted them and they were unbelievable. I was really shocked at how sweet they were. And normally you wouldn't have sweet associated with a Brussels sprout.
Selecting sweeter sprouts may appeal to more consumers, but they come with a major drawback. The very destructive diamondback moth also has a sweet tooth. So Scott Samwell, who uses a variety of techniques to control pests rather than strong chemicals, has added a new winged weapon to his toolkit, a type of wasp that doesn't sting humans and only has eyes for the moth.
We release a wasp, which then goes down and actually hunts down and attacks the grubs of the diamondback moth and injects an egg into the caterpillar. And this egg then hatches and a wasp pops out instead of a diamondback moth. So it's like aliens and all sort of stuff. So you have this warfare going on in the field.
It's this type of innovative pest control that helped Scott Samwell win the horticulture industry's top award, recently named Australian Grower of the Year.
He's just about done it all these days. He's a premium grower, always has been, and he's worked with the environment. He's very environmentally conscious. He's worked with integrated pest management, and I think his expertise in what he does.
When I saw all the other names getting read out, I was thinking, oh heck, it's a pretty impressive list to be nominated with. And then when they said my name, I was like, wow, that's incredible.
I think in Scott's speech, right at the beginning, he was elated and said, well, look, fancy having a Brussels sprout grower as winning this award.
It's not just his success with Brussels sprouts that earned Scott Samwell the accolade. He was also recognised for introducing this kale sprout hybrid to Australia.
It was actually probably the perfect time. My grandfather and father have been doing sprouts for probably over 60 years now, and they've had a resurgence. Kale's obviously, there's been a big kale boom, especially on the health side. So it was a perfect opportunity to introduce a new vegetable. We haven't had a new vegetable since broccolini, which is about 10, 12 years ago.
So this is it.
Yep, this is the field of Kalettes.
And are they similar to grow to Brussels sprouts?
Look, they're in the same family, so they're similar. They take a little bit longer, maybe about 4 to 6 weeks longer. They still have the same pests like diamondback moth, aphids.
So it's not the top that you're actually after though, is it?
No. So we're not after the leaves. We're actually after what's under the leaves, which is all these floralettes was what I call them.
And this is where it looks a bit like a Brussels sprout.
Yes, so exactly the same as a Brussels sprout. They grow from the bottom and they grow all the way up the top.
And how many would you get on a stem?
Depends on the height. We're looking at probably between 40 to 60 of these little Kalettes per plant.
So you pull them off like that, and what do they actually taste like?
Look, they're in between Brussels sprout and kale. They're not as peppery as Brussels sprouts, and they're not as bitter as kale. They're slightly nutty and even sweet.
Working out how to get the Kalettes to this stage was one challenge. Successfully machine harvesting the lighter, less spherical vegetable was another.
When I first tried harvesting the Kalettes with the fan system which blows leaves in and out, I promptly harvested it and then the machine blew all the Kalettes out into the field, so that didn't work. And then I turned the fan off and then tried it again, but inside, because they don't roll very easily like a Brussels sprout, they all promptly went through the conveyor system and then fell out the back. So it was a matter of modifying the machines to be able to suit to handle the Kalettes.
Then there's the rather large matter of what to do with the loads coming off the land. The Kalette was created by a UK company, and Scott Samwell is the only farmer in Australia who's allowed to grow it. While he now supplies to supermarkets and restaurants, in the early days, the risk of investing in this novel veggie looked like it may not pay off.
Probably the third year we had them, we planted a truckload in. Like, we went really crazy, and probably at least 60 or 70% of them we put back into the ground or we fed them to our cows. So it wasn't, we were probably a little bit gung-ho. Sometimes we get pretty excited and get into things.
The Samwells are traditionally growers who have supplied wholesalers and haven't had much to do with consumers. Being the only producer of an unfamiliar vegetable forced them to take the next step and connect with the public.
All of a sudden we had to rethink what we did because we had to sell them and we had to educate people on what are they, what can you do with them, and how do we get them out into the market.
That's where Scott's sister-in-law, DEBORAH Samwell, comes in. With guidance from a marketing consultant, she's taken charge of promoting the business and the award-winning grower behind the unusual produce.
He's so passionate, and you go out in the patch with Scott and you ask him a question and you're still there 45 minutes later because he just wants to tell you about it, and his face lights up, and I wanted to be able to tell his story, and that was something I always wanted to do from the very beginning. It was, how do I show people how passionate a farmer can be?
The keen photographer turned to social media to bring that narrative to life. As well as capturing what happens in the paddock, she also shares what happens in the kitchen as the pretty brassica finds its way onto more restaurant menus, cooking programs and household plates.
So we're seeing dishes like Kalette pizza, we've seen battered Kalettes with a dipping sauce, we've seen roasted Kalettes, we've seen Kalette crisps, there's a Kalette soup recipe that we've seen.
The way I love them actually is you cut the Kalette in half, a bit of coconut oil or olive oil on them, and then in the oven, roasted for about 160 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes to make sure that the leaves go crispy and the stems go tender. They taste exquisite.
While some don't need convincing of the merits of the Kalette, Scott Samwell is keen to let the flowery veggie find its feet before he gives the sprouts business another shake-up.
I see all sorts of really interesting vegetables, especially in the brassica area, like different colours. But I could safely say I'd just like to consolidate is what I like to do and just see how we go with what we've got at the moment.
As for the previous generation that had faith in the Brussels sprout when others didn't,
Dad, just move over a smidgen, and Scott, just move over a smidgen to your left, to my left. Excellent. That's great.
they reckon the business they've built up is in pretty capable hands.
What a handsome bunch.
I think the way sprouts are going, and with the new product of Kalette's, I think it can just get better and better. And I've got great confidence in the boys, and hopefully in the next generation, their children, to keep it going.
On the count of three, we're doing a silly one.
Ready? What do we do?
1, 2, 3. Excellent.